Two men accused in a corruption case involving a former deputy group director of the Land Transport Authority, Henry Thye, were acquitted on 11 October 2024. The trial judge ruled that the statements taken by the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau had been unreliable and inaccurate, resulting in the acquittal of Mr. Teow Heng, 56, and Mr. Lian Guan, 59. Both had been charged in July 2020 for allegedly bribing Thye to secure business advantages for their company, Teow Contractors. District Judge Soh issued a detailed 52-page judgment highlighting the procedural flaws in the case. He emphasized that the conduct of the CPIB officers responsible for recording statements from Mr. Thye and Mr. Peck raised significant doubts about the reliability of the evidence against the accused. The judge found that the statements obtained from the two men were inaccurate, unreliable, and unsafe to rely on, leading to their acquittal on all charges. The accusations against Mr. Thye and Mr. Peck centered on two counts, each under the Prevention of Corruption Act. Mr. Thye, then the director of Teow Contractors, was accused of offering 350,000 Singapore dollars in bribes to Henry Thye on two occasions in 2017 and 2018 to advance the company's interests with the LTA. Mr. Peck, the managing director of Teow Contractors, was accused of aiding Mr. Thye in the alleged offenses. On September 2, 2021, Henry Thye was sentenced to 66 months imprisonment for corruption. Additionally, a penalty order of 1,156,250 Singapore dollars, in default 12 months imprisonment, was imposed on him. A key factor in the acquittal was the conduct of two CPIB investigating officers, Chris Lim and another officer identified only as Jeffrey. According to Judge Soh, their methods of recording statements from the accused demonstrated a lack of objectivity and integrity. Mr. Lim, who recorded Mr. Thye's second statement, admitted during the trial that he had approached the interview with a preconceived notion of Mr. Thye's guilt. Judge Soh criticized Mr. Lim's handling of the statement, noting that he retyped the statement with his own wording after Mr. Thye suggested amendments. This action left Mr. Thye unable to verify whether his changes were accurately reflected, raising questions about the reliability of the statement. Similarly, Jeffrey's conduct in recording Mr. Peck's first statement was found to be flawed. The judge noted that Jeffrey had used a cut-and-paste method to compile the statement, which included repeated self-incriminating remarks. The judge remarked that the statement seemed more like a product of Jeffrey's authorship than an accurate account of what Peck actually communicated. During cross-examination, Jeffrey admitted that he had crafted the statement to suggest that Mr. Peck was the originator of the corrupt scheme. The judge noted, by Jeffrey's own admission, he drafted Peck's first statement with the intention to frame Peck, focusing almost exclusively on recording information that supported Peck's culpability, rather than objectively establishing the facts of the case. He stated that these actions by the IOS made it unsafe to rely on the statements as evidence of guilt. Another critical aspect of the judgment involved the testimony of Henry Thye, the former LTA official who received the alleged bribes. Thye, who was called as a prosecution witness, testified that neither Mr. Thye nor Mr. Peck had requested any favors in return for the loans they extended to him. He maintained that the loans were offered out of goodwill and friendship, rather than as part of a corrupt arrangement. Judge Soh noted that the prosecution had failed to challenge or impeach Thye's credibility, making his testimony more reliable in the eyes of the court. Furthermore, Thye had testified that he pleaded guilty to the charges against him in 2021, not because he believed in his own guilt, but to avoid the prolonged distress of a trial. Judge Soh rejected the prosecution's argument that Thye's guilty plea should be seen as an admission of his own corrupt intent, and that of Mr. Thye and Mr. Peck. Thye was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison in September 2021, after being found guilty of accepting 1.24 million Singapore dollars in bribes. His guilty plea, however, did not directly implicate Mr. Thye and Mr. Peck in corrupt activities, according to the judge's assessment. Judge Soh concluded that the prosecution had failed to prove its case against Mr. Thye and Mr. Peck beyond a reasonable doubt. As a result, he ordered a discharge amounting to an acquittal for both men, clearing them of all charges. The Attorney General's Chambers is currently reviewing the judgment to determine the next course of action, as confirmed by an AGC spokesperson. Both Mr. Thye and Mr. Peck had stepped down from their roles at Teow Holdings after the charges were brought against them in 2020. Several other individuals, including former directors of other engineering firms, have been sentenced to jail in connection with the corruption scheme involving Henry Fu,